Hi, today we are going to have a look at zoom lenses and more so specifically about this particular range which is 70 to 200. Hi, welcome to the Creative Zest and I am Shiv. Today we are talking about zoom lenses. Zoom lenses comes in various shapes and sizes, and in the market there is no shortage of zoom lenses. But there is this one particular focal length which is very versatile, and this is one lens which is one of the most sought after zoom lens in the market. We are talking about the 70 to 200 range. This video I'm breaking it up into three parts. In the very first part, I'm going to explain you what makes the 70 to 200 so versatile and so useful focal length to have. In the second part, we're going to have a very specific look into Tamron 70 to 210 f4 lens. And in the third part, we're going to have a look at a case study which is shot using the Tamron 70 to 210 f4 lens. And this is more so specific about how useful this particular zoom range is for landscape photography. Let's get started. To begin with, let's have a look at the first part, which is why is this particular zoom range, which is 70 to 200, so important. I'm going to break it down into three parts. In the very first part, I'm telling you why this is so versatile. 70-200 is such a focal length which is actually very versatile. If you have a look at wildlife photographers, they use it as a backup lens for their telephoto lenses, because so that they can use it for safari purpose or something wherein they're shooting large subject or where they're very close to the subject. They use this particular focal length. When it comes to wedding photographers, they use it as a lens which is as a backup for their 24 to 70 or 24 to 105. This enables them to maintain some distance from their subject and to get those candid images that they want. This is also a very important focal length when it comes to landscape photography, but that I'll be talking to you about in the third part of this video. So this is like a very sweet spot sort of range when it comes to 70 to 200, and these are type of lenses which you can actually combine with a 1.4x or a 2x teleconverter and extend the range further. Coming to the second point, which is the constant maximum aperture. More so often these lenses come in either f2.8 or f4 lenses. This constant aperture makes it very ideal to get those background separation or a background blur when you're shooting certain subjects like portraits or even animals. And also, especially considering the fact that this lens comes in f2.8 also, this is a very ideal choice for low light shooting as well. And the third factor is regarding the weight of this lens. So if you compare a similar zoom range, especially when you're clubbing it up with a 1.4x or a 2x teleconverter, compare this straightforward with a Canon 100 to 400 or probably something like a Nikon 80 to 400 lens. The weight of these lenses is much lower, and also it's much compact to carry around when compared to those bulkier zoom lenses. So hope that convinces why this particular focal length is so versatile and why it is a must-have in your photography kit. Let's move over to the second part. In this part, we are having a very specific look at the Tamron 70 to 210 f4 lens. This is a brand new lens which has come into the market. This was released around about in April 2018, and I was lucky enough to get a copy of this particular lens for review a few weeks back, and I spent a couple of days with it. And this is one focal length which I've been using for quite a long time, especially when it comes to landscape photography and travel photography. So the very moment I got hold of this lens, I knew what I wanted to shoot with this, and I knew how to test and how to make sure that this lens holds up to my expectation. So I imposed myself a challenge and I went out to shoot in a particular location with just one camera and one lens, nothing else. I just had the 70 to 210 lens, and I was pretty impressed with what I could get out of this lens. What are those images and what are the type of images, we'll come back to that in the third part as I mentioned. But let's have a very specific look at why this particular lens is an ideal choice for you. There are about like some 5 to 6 points that I have in my mind which stood out for me when I was using this particular lens. Right from the moment I got hold of this lens and I opened the bag and I had a look at this lens till the moment I was there in the field shooting, these are those 6 points which stood out to me. First thing first is the size and portability. This lens is super compact, and this is, like, I would say as comparable with this Canon 70 to 200 f4 IS or probably even the Nikon 70 to 200 f4 VR lens. This is very compact. This is just about like a 7 inches and weighs nothing more than about 850 grams. So this makes us very ideal for having a lightweight camera bag, and we don't have to lug in too much of a luggage when we are traveling. So the size and weight are something which stood out to me in the very first point. Second thing, as I mentioned mentioned to you in the previous section is a constant aperture. This is a f4 lens, and this makes it very ideal to get those background separation and make your subject stand out against the background. And this f4 is constant throughout the zoom range, and you might have noticed while I'm telling you this is a 70 to 210 focal length and not 70 to 200, so you are getting that extra 10 millimeter of focal length in this particular lens. Coming to the third point, of late what I'm noticing with the Tamron lenses is that they come weather sealed and they are like weatherproof lenses. This makes it an ideal choice for landscape photographers who are out there in the dust or rain. The weather sealing is a very crucial point because we don't want the dust to enter the lens of the camera body and spoiling the overall system, and you ending up doing multiple visits to the service center to get it rectified. So the weather sealing is one point which stood out to me in this particular lens. When it comes to using this particular lens, especially for wildlife photography, which is one of the regions where I tend to use this particular focal length more, is hand holding and the image stabilization, or VC, which is a vibration compensation, which plays a very ideal role in this particular lens. This lens actually comes with 4 stops of vibration compensation, which is a big plus, especially when you're doing hand holding, because you're shooting in a safari and you're there inside a jeep or a gypsy, and you don't have the luxury of putting a tripod. This is where that vibration compensation stands out in this particular lens. And talking about tripod, I want to mention this very critical thing that I noticed in this particular lens. One thing that I observed in this particular lens is that it comes with an optional tripod collar mount, and that tripod collar mount has an Arca Swiss style compatible lens plate built into the tripod collar, which is sort of like it. I sort of give it like a 10 on 10 points for this one, because we photographers, we use so many lenses, we use so many bodies. It becomes a big hassle for us to carry too many plates, especially when you're picking up lenses from rental houses and you want plates for them, and you travel to the field and you realize that you don't have the compatible plates for what you have. This sort of negates that whole issue, and the moment I saw it, I was like, wow, this is a very nice and a thoughtful inclusion by Tamron design guys to have the Arca Swiss style of lens plate embedded into the tripod collar itself. And I really wish more and more lens manufacturer opt for this. Hope you get to see tripod collars with this particular style of lens plate embedded into them. So this is something which I wanted to highlight. This is something which impressed me a lot, so I thought like I'll highlight this particular point when I was talking about tripod. Okay, moving on. One of the biggest challenges that we face, especially in zoom range lenses, like say assume that 100 to 400 lenses, what was there in Canon in the past, is like the lens extends when you're zooming or focusing. So which sort of is a very difficult thing, especially when you're very close to the subject, especially when you're shooting macros, say like even when you're using things like polarizing filters, or probably even when you're shooting videos using it, it becomes really a tedious job to handle such situation wherein the front element of the lens moves. But this particular lens has an internal focusing and internal zoom, which makes sure that the front element of the lens doesn't move, and which makes it very ideal to use polarizing filters, or probably even the fact that when you're shooting video with this particular lens, we can use matte boxes and have ND filters in front of it without having to worry that zooming in this particular lens will sort of hit the front element of the matte box or anything like that. Let me again quickly deviate from this particular point about the zoom. One big negative, which is my personal point of view about this lens, which is the only thing that I want to highlight as a negative in this lens, is that the very moment you pick up this lens, you'll notice one very strange thing about the zoom, which is the zoom and the focus are interchanged. Unlike the conventional lenses wherein the zoom is in the back and the focus is in the front, this lens has the zoom in the front and the focus in the back. So the moment you hold the lens, you have a tendency to rotate the barrel which is in the back, and which is actually focusing in this particular lens, and it's not the zoom. So if you want to zoom, you have to push your hand forward and reach out to that particular barrel which has the zoom ring. I found it a little bit strange because I don't know if I've seen this in any other lenses in this particular range, or probably even in other zoom lenses, of seeing the zoom and the focus barrels interchanged. But I found it peculiar. I got used to it over the course of shooting. But again, when I came back to my lenses, I felt that okay, I'm missing something. Like it confuses you, because if you're using a wide array of lenses for a particular shoot, it's always better that you're consistent and you know what you're using and how you're using them. So that I found a little bit strange, or sort of, I would say, the negative point of this particular lens. The last part about this lens which I really liked is that it's close focusing distance. I didn't try to shoot too many macro photos during the time when I had this particular lens, but I noticed that the close focusing is about a meter or slightly less than that. And considering the fact that it has at f4 aperture, at f4 when you're shooting it so close, we get a very fantastic background separation and the background blur. You can probably see a few examples here of the flowers which I shot in my garden. Though this is not a type of lens which you might use for macro photography, but it's always good to have a close focusing capability, so that when in need you can actually, instead of swapping a lens to a macro lens, you can continue using the same lens to do that macro shooting. So these were a few of the points which made me get very impressed about this particular lens when I was shooting with this lens over the last few weeks. And I definitely highly recommend this lens, because one of the key things I liked about this lens is when I got to know about the price point. A similar lens from Canon costs anywhere around $1,099, and a similar lens from Nikon costs about $1,400. And to my surprise, this particular lens, which is 70-210 f4 lens from Tamron, costs just $800. And this is irrespective of the Canon or the Nikon mount. Yes, it actually comes in the two mounts, Canon and Nikon, and I specifically used the Nikon mount and I used it on the D750 camera. So the pricing point is something which is very, very competitive, and for the image quality that you're getting and the focal length versatility what you have, this is sort of like a must-have lens for you if you're very keen about this particular focal length. And if you're a landscape photographer, the third section is definitely for you, where I'm going to talk to you about this very small case study that I did with this particular lens, and why I feel that this lens is a very good choice for landscape photographers as well. Hope you like this particular video, and I'm really thankful for Tamron India to loan me this particular lens to test it out and do a review about it. I'm really impressed about this particular lens. I'll probably link a few of those images, full resolution images, in the description below, so that you can check it out at 1:1 size and what you can get out of this particular lens. If there are anything specific that you want to ask about this lens, please do leave a comment below or drop in a mail to me, and I'll be more than happy to respond back to you. And the final question is obvious, like, is it a worthwhile lens to buy compared to the equivalent Canon or Nikon? My answer is definitely yes. Considering the cost factor of it, considering the image quality, and considering the versatility what this particular lens gives, this is definitely a highly recommended lens, and I would definitely suggest for either the beginners or probably even the professionals who want a more affordable and a very high quality lens in their kit. This is some lens which they might want to check out, and I definitely recommend this particular lens. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.